In day-to-day business, Korean shamans most commonly assume the role of a fortune teller. But shamanism is not the only art of fortune telling in Korea. For a long time, I wanted to make an episode about these different types of fortune telling, but surprisingly, it's not easy to find interesting enough stories about them. I'm not sure why that is, because these other types of fortune tellings are no less popular either. But finally, here we go. The most prominent art of fortune-telling in Korea is what we call saju, the 4 pillars of destiny: birth year, month, date, and hour. It originated from Tang Dynasty, but has adopted and developed locally in Korea over the centuries. In this episode, I'll use the term Chinese astrology for the ease of term, even though there are significant differences to Western astrology. Unlike shamanic fortune-telling, which relies on divine insight, Chinese astrology analyzes based on certain formula and predefined data. Advocates of Chinese astrology often insist the formula is based on century-old accumulation of data, so it is a form of statistics. But of course, it does not by all means meet the criteria to be accepted as a statistics in the academic sense. Nevertheless, Chinese astrology is considered a subject you have to study on for many years if you want to gain an understanding. Some shamans do learn it too and adapt to their business on top of their divine insights, so the line between these two arts of fortune-telling can get a bit blurred. Nonetheless, shamanism and Chinese astrology have two very different bases. Other popular ways of fortune-telling include face and palm reading. They too advocate their art being based upon centuries of data as Chinese astrology. Other forms of fortune-telling from the West has gained certain popularity in recent decades too, and people are not unfamiliar with tarot reading or horoscope nowadays. Most Koreans are not particularly superstitious, but then for many, it's also not uncommon to seek their fortune told, typically at the beginning of the new year or before the big event such as SAT or a career change. In particular, checking on the couple's compatibility and harmony before wedding is still a common practice, especially among parents' generation. To cater various clients of varying degree of seriousness, there exist various forms of fortune-telling business, from a fortune-teller's stall on the street side to a so-called fortune-telling cafe where fortune-tellers go around table to table, to shamans' establishments, to a very formal setup of a consultation office of a Chinese astrologer master. Today's stories will touch bits of all these different arts and aspects of fortune-telling in Korea. I hope you find them first and foremost amusing. So, here are 9 allegedly true stories about fortune-telling in Korea. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by host Anthony. My mom had a boyfriend before her marriage to my dad. Mom talked about that to me only when I got near 30. The boyfriend was from the same town as Mom's and was her first love. On top of that, from a wealthy family too? God, if she had married him, her life wouldn't have been so tangled up with the issue of money, or the lack thereof. But his family was strongly opposed to their marriage. She didn't know why then, but just that she had to break up with him in the end. Marriage to my dad was an arranged one. My grandfather, Dad's father, claimed that he could sense my mom's positive energy and just the right kind of bride for his son. The marriage plan went ahead only a week after their first meeting. Feeling dubious, Mom digged up a bit and found her groom-to-be was born destined to become a monk. In other words, not born to get married and start a family. Mom pleaded her father to call off the wedding, but in her generation, such a matter was to be decided by the parents, and her father browbeated her into the marriage. My dad turned out to be a totally unsympathetic husband. Whenever yet another occasion of his dry, cold character surfaced, Mom used to lament that he was not meant to start a family. Life rolled on regardless, and I happened to go overseas. Before I left Korea, I went to have my fortune told for fun. The overall analysis was that I was born to an okay life, but there was a farewell to be expected. I simply thought it made sense because I was about to leave Korea. Not long after, I lost my brother. It was an unexpected devastation. Was the farewell that the fortune teller meant to be the loss of my brother? Had I known it, I could have had at least a proper goodbye with him. A few years later, Mom told me that she had run into her old boyfriend and finally learned why his family refused her. They had her fortune told, and it turned out that it was written in Mom's fate to lose a child. What a strange coincidence. Her fate to lose a child, and my fate to have a farewell. Are our destinies all predetermined after all, I wonder? I can't take a fortune-telling for fun anymore. It's a story my teacher told us during a class, as it happened to her acquaintance. She had two very close friends. One day she learned there was a fortune teller with a high reputation not far from where they lived, and suggested her friends to visit him. One of them seemed particularly reluctant, but the other two persuaded her, and in the end took her to the fortune teller. The fortune teller first told the future of the reluctant friend. Upon hearing her birth year and date, he assured her that she was born with a great fortune, great husband, great children, wealth, and all. As for the other two, he just said more or less the typical repertoire of fortune-telling, that they should be careful at this and that age, marriage after a certain age, an overall okay life, and so on. Naturally, the friend who was initially reluctant was the one who left with the biggest smile. And a few weeks later, she died of a fatal car accident. After the funeral of the life tragically cut short, her friend somehow remembered what the fortune teller said and got somehow angry. What a conman! What a crook! She went to see him again, this time to taunt him. As soon as she walked into his room, the fortune teller remarked, "Your friend passed away, didn't she? When she walked in with you and the other friend, I could see the death coming in behind her. What's the use of warning about it when one can't do anything about it? I lied, so she could at least feel happy in the last few days." I'm not religious, nor particularly believe in fortune-telling, tarot card, or such, beyond casual interest. Overall, I led a normal life with a very few ups and downs. The biggest disaster was a broken leg from a car accident when I was little, and the only death around me was my grandpa, who died of a natural cause at a ripe old age. But into this year, it all changed. Literally everything went wrong, big and small. I lost not a small sum of money, got various health issues, troubles with people, and just damn unfortunate whatever I did. And just this morning, when the hairdryer exploded in my hand, thankfully it didn't lead to an injury beyond some burnt hair, Nevertheless, it snapped something in my mind, and I had to complain it to Mom. God, I think my life is fucked this year. Why nothing's working for me? To my half-joking lament, Mom's face stiffened. Well, I wasn't intending to tell you till next year, but you have to be extra careful this year, she said. About 20 years ago, she once visited a Buddhist temple and was told from a monk there that her son, me, was going to have a very difficult year at a certain age, and if he managed to pull through, the rest would be more or less smooth sailing. And that certain age happened to be this year for me. Mom never mentioned it to me, but has been keeping the warning all these years. Apparently, her only wish at the beginning of the year was, please let us just survive through this year. Her story suddenly reminded me of what happened a couple of months ago too. I was just waiting at a crossway and saw an old couple walking past behind me, giving me a weird stare. I just quickly turned my head away, but my ears caught their low whisper. How come is he still alive? Still 5 months left for this year. I'm frankly afraid how I'm going to make it through. About 17 years ago, when my oldest sister and her fiancé wanted to get married, the fiancé's family opposed harshly. Stuck in the distressing situation, my dad sought a reputable fortune teller to ask her about his daughter's marriage. The groom's family is going to give in eventually. It just takes time. You'd better worry about your life than your daughter's marriage, though, fortune teller said. Dad was not particularly superstitious, but couldn't just brush off what she said. He first visited a small local clinic. The doctor there prescribed some medication, but seemed clearly unsure of the diagnosis. It only made Dad more anxious, and in the end he took tests at the big university hospital. They found stage 2 stomach cancer. The doctor commented that he was pleasantly surprised that Dad sought a test at relatively early stage even before he got any distinctive symptoms. Usually the older generation, especially those from rural areas, tend to stay put till it gets unbearably uncomfortable and thus miss the window of effective treatment. Shortly after, the family of sister's fiancé finally agreed to the marriage, and my dad went under the operation shortly after the wedding. Thankfully, he recovered and lives an active life to this day. I don't know what the fortune teller said was just a routine for any old client, or if she really saw something, but I guess we have to be thankful for her in any case. I went to university in the US. During the time, I was once invited to a friend's wedding. The wedding took place near the bridegroom's family home, so the majority of the guests were from the groom's side. Among them was a female friend, let's just call her Jane, not her real name. Jane was very open and bubbly, and got quickly close to my friend, the bride, too. On the evening of the wedding rehearsal, Jane suggested that she would tell the compatibility of the soon-to-be wedded couple based on astrology. Now, we have a Chinese astrology, shamanism, etc. in Korea, and as I see it, astrology takes the similar position in the US. Those who have a deep knowledge of it can be well beyond the astrology page on a ladies' magazine, just as sophisticated as a professional fortune teller in Korea. It's a bit of a cliche that such a type would be typically a woman, liberal, vegan, hippie, etc. And I think Jane was one such. The bride was not religious nor superstitious, but after a tiring day of wedding rehearsal, had no reason to say no to a bit of a fun, and told Jane her birth date, etc. Jane first told the bride's overall fortune, which had nothing in particular. But when she moved on to the couple's compatibility, her face froze. She tried to wave it away. It was nothing serious. Astrology was just for fun, and so on, contrasting to a very earnest advocate to the art of astrology just earlier. Bride sensed she was hiding something and pressed Jane to tell frankly. What Jane said in the end was, the bride was to break up the first marriage acrimoniously and find her happily ever after from her second marriage. Just to be clear, it was to be my friend's first wedding. Jane once again emphasized it was all just a superstition, and the bride seemed just to try to take it with an awkward laugh. Anyway, the wedding went ahead and finished successfully. A few years later, the couple divorced due to the husband's physical violence. There was absolutely no sign of his violent nature during their courting period. Actually, all of his family and friends had no idea either and were shocked by his sudden violent turnout. Later I got to talk to a friend, and she said her parents did have their compatibility told by at least a couple different fortune tellers, and they all said only good things. Everybody liked her ex-husband because he had everything from a good looks to decent background to a good career. It was really only Jane that had any warning to say, and turned out she was the only correct one. To tell the truth, I had a similar experience myself. I had a boyfriend who was in every way a perfect match for me. We went to the same school, shared the same birthday, same interests and everything. The couple's compatibility was perfect, fortune tellers said. Everyone around me approved of him too. Except my younger sister. She barely met him a couple of times, and still she said he would appear in an ugly way in her dreams. We even had a quarrel once, me calling her reasoning a BS. To cut the story short, my relationship with him had a nightmarish ending. He turned out an obsessive control freak and a stalker. In the end, I had to file a report, change my phone number, and move away too. My sister was the only one who saw it coming somehow. It could be just a benefit of the hindsight, but sometimes it's worthwhile to listen to what a single dissenter should say. On the day I introduced my long-term boyfriend to Mom, she told me that she once sought a fortune teller years ago. I had a rather late teenager's rebel in my early 20s, and Mom was so concerned that she was desperate to hear an opinion, any opinion. The fortune teller said the usual things, not so lucky with the parents, but with future children, yes. And then he said,
"Oh, and your daughter's going to marry a guy from overseas. And you won't see much of her once she gets married."
Mom at the time assumed that the rebellious me would meet a foreigner and move out of Korea. And I had to laugh out loud because my boyfriend is from Jeju Island, the biggest island of Korea. Well, you could call it overseas in a sense after all. But a few months later, When the fortune teller's prediction fulfilled itself, I could not laugh anymore. About the time I and my boyfriend were discussing about wedding, Mom suddenly and unexpectedly passed away. So Mom could not see my wedding, nor me as a married woman. I wonder how much the fortune teller really knew. I'm preparing for a big test and usually go to a public library to study there. For some reason, there are a lot of shamanic or fortune tellers establishments around the library. Some says that's because of the particular feng shui of the area. One day, I felt like my fortune told, as I was anxious about the upcoming test, trouble with a girlfriend, etc. I asked around if there was a reliable shaman or fortune teller. Most advised me not to bother, as they were all con artists. But the restaurant owner, whose place I frequented for lunch, recommended a fortune teller nearby, a master of Chinese astrology. So I visited there. The fortune teller looked pretty ordinary. I told him my birth year, date and hour and my name, and he opened up the old book with various illustrations. He went through fairly typical repertoire of fortune-telling, that things will get better past 30. This year's test is difficult, but will pass next year's. My girlfriend is on the clashing path to mine. My life partner was to be the one who was born in the year of Lamb, and whom I was going to meet past 30. Then he flipped through some pages and stopped at one with a scary illustration that seemed like a ghost.
There's a baby ghost,
said he, and asked if my mother had a miscarriage or abortion. I had no idea, and he insisted that I ask my parents later. So back home in the evening, I mentioned that I had my fortune told earlier in the day, and casually added, "He says there's a ghost of a baby around me?" My dad could not hide his surprise and muttered, "Could it be?" Mom was reluctant, but finally told me that she was pregnant between my older brother and I. But she took a wrong kind of medication before she knew she was pregnant and had to abort it. Come to think of it, the illustration of the ghost was indeed particular. Grey-skinned with short and skinny arms and legs, somewhat resembling a dead fetus. And to think the fortune teller could see that. It's what happened to my friend's great-uncle, whom I'll call just Grandpa here. When the first grandchild was born in the family, Grandpa was, of course, delighted. He visited the fortune teller whom he'd been acquainted with to ask his suggestion for a name for his new grandson. The fortune teller seemed to contemplate a while over the baby's birth date and hour, and said,
"The baby's just born. Why don't we wait a while longer?"
It was clearly a polite way of turning the request down. Grandpa was impatient because he wanted it to be perfect and ready for his first grandchild. He sought another fortune teller, and he suggested several names with a prediction of most fortunate future for the newborn. The family chose one of them and named the baby. Not quite 100 days after the birth, the baby unexpectedly passed away. It was solely unexpected and pronounced as an unfortunate case of a sudden infant death syndrome. The whole family was devastated. The baby didn't even show any sign of ill health. He laughed and was happy one moment, and then turned cold and lifeless the next. When an inexplicable misfortune strikes, we all try to seek why. Grandpa remembered the reluctance of the first fortune teller and expected there should be something he didn't tell him. Maybe he shouldn't have disregarded him and hurriedly named the baby after all. He had to ask the fortune teller.
It's not that I'm blaming you or anything, but my heart breaks with the guilt if my impatience had killed my grandson. Tell me, do please tell me, why did you say we should wait then?
The old man's question to the fortune teller turned into a tearful lament.
No, it wasn't the timing of naming. It was just... when I analyzed your grandson's fortune, I saw a total innocence, not a speck of stain. Usually any human is born with some tangled karma, some damage, some guilt. I somehow couldn't see a baby so pure would survive long in this world. That's why I suggested to wait back then.
He then explained why the first 100 days after a birth has been considered critical in traditional customs. Yes, that was the most vulnerable period before a newborn develops its immune system, and many babies indeed didn't survive in the past when the infant mortality was high. But also, in traditional superstition, they say the name of the newborn gets recorded on the doomsday book of the underworld only after its first 100th day. The fortune teller proceeded to console the old man.
Your grandson was born pure and died pure, untouched by this dirty world. So please, don't torture yourself with a sense of guilt, which may only tangle up the innocent life of the baby. Let him go in peace.
Whenever I had my fortune told, either by Chinese astrology or tarot cards, I was always told that I was born with all-around good luck. Wouldn't have to worry about money or health until the day I die. Whether I went to have it told myself or my mother went to ask about my life, it should count up to about 5 times from 5 different fortune tellers. And usually the fortune tellers would end their consultation with, "It's all good. No need to visit any other fortune teller." Shortly before I started my military service at 23, I noticed a new tarot card fortune teller starting her business in my town. 30-something fortune teller was quite pretty. I heard she had lived most of her life in America, where she mastered various kind of witchcraft apparently. Came to Korea when got tired of life there and started a tarot card business because that was what was trending in Korea. After hearing all those rumors, I got curious and visited her to have my fortune told. She said the usual things that I'd been told already, that I was born lucky all around. She also said I was likely to get an injury coming November, but it might turn out to be a good luck in disguise. Came November, and I had become a corporal in the military. I had long forgotten what the fortune teller said by then, but I indeed badly hurt my leg, and I ended up being discharged. Because the accident occurred during the active exercise, I became even listed as a person of merit. Only then I was stunned how accurate my fortune teller was. So I visited her again after being discharged, reminded her what she had told me and that her prediction all turned out to be true. She smiled and said she expected me to visit again. She then added there would be no more fortune to tell, and I wouldn't need to come back. I sensed she wasn't telling me a full story, so I felt her out. Well, every other fortune teller would also say that I shan't visit other fortune tellers, and I have no idea why. I suspect they are hiding something. Am I right? I said. She seemed to be caught unprepared, and muttered,
"It's not that you are wrong."
I wasn't going to let it pass like that, and kept on asking what she meant by that. She finally said,
"You are indeed born with all-around fortune, but the life ends at 24.
What?
Your life ends soon."
She said that so calmly that it sounded even more devastating.
That's why other fortune tellers would restrain from telling you the full story.
I was indeed born with a good fortune, only until 24. I didn't know how to react, and turned into one stuttering mess. You're saying this to make me pay you more, aren't you?
"Yes, you're right. So don't come back,"
she said. I threw out playing clever, and started downright begging her that I didn't want to die yet. I wanted to live. Help me, please. Please? She finally agreed to help me, as long as I could promise to keep one thing, that I should never utter a word if somebody should stare at me at the critical moment, whether it be a man or a ghost. I would anyway have said yes to anything at that stage. She then gave me a small cross and a glass jar. She instructed to mix my urine and blood in the jar and put the cross in it, and then discard it somewhere remote where other people would not tread. Meanwhile, she would have a candle lit, and if I managed to fulfill the task, the candle should burn itself out. She didn't ask for any payment, that she didn't want to be seen to make a business out of a matter of life and death. So, that same evening, I took the prepared jar to the remote corner of a college campus near my place. By the time I left it behind a bush, I didn't feel quite as tense anymore, and found it all rather funny. So on the way back, I called a friend and chatted away. Then I saw a man approaching from the other side, wearing a black hat low and a long trench coat. His eyes were staring at me, and those eyes were red, and they looked just like that of a goat. I reminded myself of the instruction and kept quiet, while my friend on the phone was asking,
"Hello, still there?"
and walked past him. I heard him muttering as he passed me by,
"Shit, it's got a mobile."
I visited a fortune teller the following day. She gave me a cup of tea and informed me that the candle had burnt out all right. And then she explained that I had this ring around my wrist. She called it a certain name, but I forgot, which was deployed by demonic entities. My injury in November was apparently the demon testing the water before the final blow. Fortunately, it was a kind of situation she could handle, and thus could help me this time. I don't know if it's related, but a few days later, I heard a female student was murdered around the remote corner of the campus by a psychopathic killer. In any case, I'm still alive a year later, and my leg has got also much better, enough to walk and run around without too much difficulty. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Just like most people in today's stories claim, I don't consider myself particularly superstitious, but I did seek a Chinese astrologer once before I decided to move to Europe. I don't think it really helped me in any meaningful way, but human vulnerability surfaces in the time of change and need. One thing I remember is that she basically said my career choice was wrong. Maybe that's why I'm not so successful. Have you ever had your fortune told? What was the art of fortune telling of your choice? Has the prediction turned out true? Let me know in the comment. So this was 199th episode, and the next week is going to be the compilation episode to wrap up the 4th year run of Tales from Korea. I hope you join there for the little celebration, and I think there will be a little announcement too. So, until next Sunday, stay safe and take care.